Hello and welcome back to the Rising Sovereign podcast. I'm Jay Azavari.
And I'm Jaydee Azavari.
And today we have a special guest with us. We have Josh McLaughlin. And I want to just say in preparation for our discussion with Josh that he is a shining example of what it means to be a man in the world today. He is a husband, a father. He is the founder of the Tree of Life mission. He's the author of The Word Abounds Within Us. And Josh has a master's degree in divinity and a doctorate degree in clinical psychology.
Yes.
And we are really happy to have you here.
I would say that Josh is an incredible teacher and leader, that he's been a presence in my life, a guiding force through the last 5+ years in relation to initially my own children and our family, and then personally, which I wasn't necessarily the intention or the idea when I first connected with you, was for you to be like a personal wisdom holder for my journey. So that's also really important.
And he wields this with great humility. In the pre-show conversation, he said, you can also just say that I'm some guy that talks about God. So we'll add that in there as well.
Yeah, so Josh, if you wouldn't mind sharing a bit of your story to get us started.
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much. In light of the nature of y'all's podcast, it may be important to know that my wife and I homeschool our 4 children, and that we share that responsibility together. And anyway, there's an overlap as well.
There's another piece: homeschooling Papa and Mama. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, my story. I grew up in evangelical Christian world, and early on in my adolescence, really felt a call to become a pastor and to really pursue Christianity as thoroughly as I could. So I went and got an undergraduate degree in biblical studies. But as I was doing that process, I really went through a process of becoming disillusioned with how do we really come to know the truth of God? Because I was pursuing God intellectually. If I can understand the scriptures and the ancient languages and really discover the truth, then I'll be okay. Then I'll know how to help people. And it didn't take long to realize how much of a challenge it is that there's so many different opinions on every scripture there is. And on every doctrine, there's different opinions. And so I really struggled to figure out what is the method of deciphering and discerning what is true. And so, there came a point where I was ready to throw the whole thing up and just get rid of it. Like, I don't know. But there's something inside of me that said, no, I need Christ. I need God. So I went and got this master's degree in divinity. And in the process of doing that, I worked as a hospital chaplain, watching, sitting with people in the midst of illness and death. And that really rocked my world as a young man. I mean, I was 23, sitting next to people as they died. I just couldn't handle it. And eventually I just said, well, I can't make sense of any of this. I can't make sense of how, of the scriptures and how that is the word of God with all the various baggage that goes along with interpreting the scripture. I can't make sense of how God can be in the world while all this suffering can be in the world. I can't make sense of all these things. And so I just said, I got to find another way. And so that's when I went and got a doctorate degree in psychology, hoping that I could, as a therapist, be a loving and beneficial therapeutic presence in the world, regardless of religion, regardless of spirituality.
Right.
But life kept calling me back. There's something about the pursuit of God that I couldn't really let go of. And then I had this experience soon after I met you all and became involved in your family's life, where I was standing on the mountain just south of Asheville, and these angels came beside me and lifted me up and carried me into this golden city and began to offer me this gold, feeding me this gold. And after a time of consuming these gold bars, I heard this voice that said, "Feed my people the gold." And I turned around, and there was hundreds of people standing there waiting to receive this heavenly nourishment. And then suddenly the vision ended, and there I was on the mountain again. And that really changed my life, as you can imagine. And so I thought, I've got to change. Life can't be the same anymore. If I pretend that life is the same after that moment, then I'm more lost than I realize. And so I gave up my practice, my mental health practice, and the whole psychology business. Well, like, I have to figure out what this means. I have to understand what I'm being asked to do. And I took it seriously. So I moved. I sold our properties, and I moved off to another place so that way I could really be more present with my children and more present with this internal experience and trying to discover what is the gold that I'm being asked to, one, consume and take within me, but then also to share and to give. And so the ministry, Tree of Life mission, is my attempt to begin to feed the people the gold, and it's an outpouring of my sense of what that means. So for the last 3+ years, I've really spent quietly in this room, in this place, here out in the middle of nowhere, really trying to listen and observe and identify what is the gold, what is truth, who is the Word, and how can we connect with that in this time. So how's that for an introduction?
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I ask to tell us a little bit about the name, the Tree of Life?
Oh, yes. So Tree of Life. So the Tree of Life in the story of Genesis was given to Adam and Eve for them to eat freely. And that when they ate of it, they would live forever. And yet once they took a different path, there was a guardian of the tree. The seraphim, the cherubim were placed in front of the tree, so that way the man and woman could not take of its fruit. And so there's this question of, what does that mean? What is that fruit? And why was it taken away? And has it ever been given back? Is it possible for us to acquire that now? And part of what I've really been discovering during these last 3 years is that fruit is the fullness of God. So Paul, in his letter to the Ephesians, states that our purpose here on earth is to be filled with the fullness of God, so that in us and through us, all things in heaven and on earth will be united in God. That's why we're here. Right? And that the fruit of the Tree of Life is that fullness of God, the fullness of God's word given to the first man and woman, so that they may eat freely of it and be filled with the fullness of God, so they can take God within them and cast it forth into the garden, filling all things, uniting all things with God. And yet they took a different path, right? And so then this fruit becomes withdrawn, but not permanently. for a time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. My sense is we're in this developmental process. All mankind is developing, and so this moment of disconnection from the fullness of God begins our infancy as mankind. And we, at various points, we are offered nourishment to help us grow and mature. So, say the Mosaic Law. What was in the Ark of the Covenant? Whatever it was, what do we know about it? Is that one, it had cherubim on the top of it, guarding whatever was inside. And it was hidden behind a curtain that had cherubim woven into it. So the cherubim are those beings, heavenly beings, that guard the fruit of the tree of life. The Word of God, God's presence was within that ark, the fullness of God. So it was there, it was given to the people, but not to be eaten freely, as in the garden, but through the priest. The sacrificial system was the mediator. And so that was what was needed for that developmental period. But there came a time where it was where mankind, all men and women, were ready to transition to a new level of spiritual maturity. Christ, right? Jesus. So what happened when Jesus died on the cross? The curtain was ripped in two. Right? The curtain that had the cherubim on it was ripped, and the Holy of Holies, the Ark of the Covenant, was laid bare. That fruit of the tree of life that was hidden within the most sacred part of the temple was moved and placed within the heart of every man and woman on earth. What did Jesus tell us? That after his death, we would no longer worship in the mountain or in the temple, but in spirit and truth. And it wouldn't be for just one people, it would be all men and women, everywhere. And so that fruit of the tree of life, through Jesus's unspeakable sacrifice of love, pure, most perfect act of love, giving himself for the sake of all, that fruit was planted within the heart of every man and woman. And you can see it. It's there. It's a beautiful pearl right on the right side of every heart, every man and woman's heart. And it's through that pearl that we are now able to eat freely, to be filled with the fullness of God. Through our humble gestures of faith, that pearl is open like a doorway to the presence of God, and God pours through. Okay? So, and now, but why? Not so we can feast and enjoy and say, well, it's God's mine, I'm going to enjoy it. No, it's so that we can take it and sow those seeds of God out into this living spiritual garden of earth, and continue that process of uniting all things in heaven and earth in God.
Beautiful.
Did that answer your question?
Yes. And then some. Yeah. Thank you. Well, when we met, it was 2020, and there was a lot of things here afoot on our property. We were sort of in the middle of a number of different intersecting movements and subgroups and communities and things in and around some reaction to the state of the world at the time. And you came out and gave a talk to a outdoor pavilion full of people. And it was a really memorable experience, but that was the first time I met you in person. So it seems like at that time you were already engaged in bringing some of this truth to the people. And what is interesting, what I find interesting in light of everything that has unfolded since then in our lives and these attempts at bringing people together and creating structures and communities based around some of these common desires, is linking that back to like the evolution of humanity and where we're at and what we are or aren't ready for. So it seems interesting to look at that within the story that you told about there being a trajectory of humanity going from needing some sort of safeguards to then having things be opened up to a greater degree, and then how we're following that collectively, and what types of things are going to be beneficial, what types of things are going to be disastrous. And so I know we've talked a little bit about this idea of what we have the capacity for culturally and collectively as far as community and some of these different movements. And just what we've witnessed is there's been a lot of beauty, but also a lot of struggle in a lot of these endeavors. And so if we could expand on some of the things that we talked about before, that would be great.
Well, so if I'm accurate, then, this moment of Jesus where the Word became incarnate within his flesh was a pivotal developmental milestone. It was truly the turning point of history. Everything changed. It's like puberty, for mankind, where suddenly we are awakened to a new capacity that simply was not there before. God is within us. But that was 2,000 years ago. So the question is, where are we now, developmentally? Right. And so, it's the moment of Jesus was not the end of things. It was the opening of a new era. Right? And so my sense is where we are now is something akin to budding adulthood, in terms of the spiritual development of mankind, which is a tumultuous time. I mean, you just think about it psychologically speaking. What happens when during young adulthood you're separating from the protection and care of these adults who have been with you since birth, and you're striking out on your own, but you're not really old enough to know where you're going. You have a sense, you have a foundation, that was that our parents attempted to nurture within us, but now it's time for us to figure it out on our own. And so there's a lot of mistakes that are made during this time. A lot of people who go off in various directions, and later in life think, "What in the world was I thinking?" So I think collectively this is roughly where we are. And so it's a time of profound excitement, because we are now striking out on our own to do this work that we're created to do. And yet it's also a time of turmoil, because the supports that were there for us previously are now being scaled back. So there's this gesture from the heavens of trust in us to say, now each of you, every man and woman on earth, it's time for you to stand independently in the world, fully, to take responsibility, to not rely on your parents, not rely on the crutches of an institution or and all of its graces, but instead, i.e. the church, to be more explicitly, and instead to stand forward as men and women in the world who can be united to God within us, regardless of our association with some sort of sacrament or liturgy or religion, or community, etc. Reflections.
Well, I know, and there's a few different layers that I'm still working on, and that might be an entire lifetime of work, how they come together. And they, one pocket is community, which we just touched upon to some degree, especially when you were talking about the last 5 years of our lives.
Right.
But in my adulthood, for example, I've had this idea that community is what I need. I need to create a community. I need to be a part of a community. And it's not, definitive exactly, but it's a very abstract, but specific example of what that should look like. We're on a big piece of land. We cook food together. We help raise our children together, and somehow we all get along, right? Many people I know, and us included, have attempted that now in the last 10 to 20 years. And each time it's just fallen apart. or at least that's been ultimately the experience. Yet we've always learned and we've come out with grace, or we like, oh, that's why, those types of reflections. But there's been a nagging piece of like, well, maybe I'm just not doing something right yet, or I haven't figured it out and I'm not good enough. And that goes into, some more recent personal developmental aspects of myself, where I'm working on like understanding the idea of ungodly self-reliance and how much that's been like the propelling current of the last 25 years of my life, and how that has also left me ultimately very like drained and like I'm not doing something right. So the aspect of community is just a piece of that. But coming to where we are now, which simultaneously has drawn us into Christianity, which I haven't identified as a Christian for most of my life, which is, Josh, it's a new thing for me too. And I'm, trying to put it all together, but I know underlying all of that, if it even makes sense at this point, is the idea of family. And through the last 10 years of us being together, and then the development of Ada and going through the COVID era, like we've continued to see how important family is, how the family structure has seemingly been under attack, almost, we could say, in a variety of different ways. And how we can reclaim that and what that's about, and how then that fits into this bigger idea of community that has continually like not also worked. I don't know if any of that really makes sense, but those are like the pieces that are like floating around in my mind now that I can see there's a commonality with, but I don't have a better way to, weave it yet. You want to say something?
I mean, I would say that I think that in 2020, there was this sort of forced experience of really beginning to question a lot of the institutions on such a large scale. And so it did end up bringing a lot of people to seek something that was, maybe community, but it was almost like community as a replacement for the system that had failed. And so, that almost replacing one thing with another thing is going to have its own problems that will arise with that. But there was this big energy of people being almost desperately thrust together from largely different backgrounds and orientations in a lot of ways, but being united around a feeling failed and abandoned by the system at large. And so, community, it seems like there is within us some kind of a yearning for a connection. And if it's yearning for something that is ancient, like a tribal way of life, it's been so far removed from most of our realities for so long. It's almost like we're throwing this thing together without any foundation or background or experience, and then left to try and sort out all of the different things that will inevitably arise. And it seems like what needs to happen as part of that process, as a precursor or a prerequisite, is one's own self-reflection, in order to fortify something, so that you're coming to this not from a place of desperation and not from a place of need, because that was something that I witnessed a lot. There's a lot of hot.
Then there's like the see that I get in a trap with that though.
Yeah.
Because of like the self-reflection and the need, that was like a spinning hamster wheel for me. And how I've stepped out of that is Christianity. It's like, now I understand that I was, and I mean, that's the trap. Like, I still get like, oh, my brain starts to go, oh, it's up to me. I got to figure it out. And yes, we have free will, and how we like distinguish those two things is totally beyond me at this point. But I do have the physical experience, the spiritual experience of what surrender means now. That does feel very like in its infancy versus what I felt like last year even, or the year before, or the year before that. And it's a connective undercurrent of this surrender of when you say, Josh, like laying down your life for another, like that is a different practice. Like that practice is different than I have to figure this out or it's up to me. And, you know, in relation to the community, which is a bigger representation of the family, right? Like I know within the context of our own children, when we haven't raised them with in that undercurrent of Christianity, we haven't raised them with really anything under that except this like self-reliant piece. And that's left us all very lost, I think. And there's these moments where when we find ourselves struggling with our children, where I read in a really, really profound book, a story a man was sharing where his son had like went out, and they were a Christian family, and this son had like spray painted the school, his high school. And his father, like that came to be, they all learned about what happened. And in the book, the father writes, you know, I was able to just like put my hand on my son and be like, you know, we don't do that in our family. And something about that struck me so deep, that they had this family coming from Christianity had a core set of the foundation. And whether that's, you know, beliefs, whether that's the 10 Commandments, what, you know, like we can expound upon what that truly means in essence versus like the details. But it was like, we didn't have that. Like our family and the way that I've raised them and the way that I've been living didn't have something underneath to be like, we don't do that in our family. This is what we do. And this is how we prepare. And if we don't have that within our family, how could we possibly have that in a community? Right.
Well,
yeah.
I want to interject at this point because, you know, the temptation, especially as your world is shifting, is to look back in a derogatory way.
Right.
But you know, the foundation of the spiritual life is freedom. I mean, it's the freedom to stand in the world and to make conscious decisions. And that, you know, if we are ever going to be able to repent, lay down our life, and look out at another, to truly see another and love him or her, it requires us to do that consciously, freely, you know. And so, you know, encouraging your children to think for themselves, to question everything, to stand on their own 2 feet is not a negative thing. You know, it's strengthening them in a certain way. And we could also look and say, there are a lot of families that have a strong religious ethic. We don't do that in our family. And they impose that in such a external, heavy way that the child learns that, oh, to be a good son or daughter requires compliance, requires submission. And in fact, that is a primitive version of the human expression. 10 Commandments was a long time ago. And there's a lot we can learn from that. But that's it. Those are written for spiritual children. We are growing up now. We are spiritual adults. And we need the education and guidance that is tailored to adults. You know, you don't take a 20-year-old and put him in first grade and teach him, you know, his ABCs. You know, that's not going to help him. You know, you need to speak to a 20-year-old. And freedom is a really important gesture at this time. And so, any reflections?
No, that's good. Because then it's like, well, I did kind of do that. I did give them the message to question things. And yeah, how to also support giving them something that within the question, they don't just feel completely lost within an abyss. And that's
they're not alone to do that.
So so that's key. So key.
Well, and it seems like the piece about being able to question is significant in the sense that it gives the choices that are made, you know, when there is the opportunity to choose, to be, you know, selfless or compassionate or loving or any of the mistakes. It gives them a lot more weight because they're not just coming from a place of compliance.
Mm-hmm.
So the significance and the meaning is going to be more pronounced in one who is maybe not a compliant, follower.
Our children are not compliant.
None of them are.
None of them are compliant. Yeah.
But I would say neither are we.
Neither are we.
So
that's how we got right here, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, I want to really think, because this is so important. The pandemic was a profound gift to humanity, because you think. I was talking with a good friend of mine who's in his upper 80s, and he was reflecting on his childhood and how there was so much trust woven within the community. Everyone was just the local community. He, as a young, 6-year-old, could wander around and have complete independence with no adult supervision and feel safe, because there was there was a different sense of community back then. But over the last 100 years, things have been changing. And this change, we can look at and be like, oh, it's so terrible. Look how unsafe and divided and fearful we all are. But these are the fruits of this developmental transition. It's going to be difficult. The child who goes off and leaves home is going to experience a lot of turmoil. And so here we are. But I think, there's so many events over the last 100 years that woke us all up to the reality that we can't just lean on the church, on our government, on the medical institution, on the educational institution, on all these societal, cultural things in place, and say, oh, they'll just hold me. They'll take care of me. I don't have to worry about that anymore. I can just be nurtured by these structures, these parents. And yet we're in this transition where we're saying, no, those things have got to roll back now. And we have to stand on our own. And it's a terrifying process, and a lot of people lose their way. Right? But it's essential that we go through it. It's essential that the pandemic happened, because it woke us up to the fact that, no, really, we have to stand on our own. And so but anyway, so there's that piece. So now, from this new place, we ask the question of, what is this community that we're longing for, and how do we find it? And because of course there's a yearning for connection. Of course there's this longing to not be alone in the world. But community can't be the same at this developmental phase as it was when we were younger. And so now we have to ask, what is community? It's not tribalism. We can't go backward developmentally. So community at this phase requires a radical level of personal responsibility. And I think for us to be able to be in a meaningful relationship with another man or woman requires that we first and foremost seek our community in God. That we really genuinely within our hearts seek to be filled with the fullness of God. And I think that becomes the foundation. And then we connect with another who is also doing this work. And we support each other as two solid individuals seeking to be filled with God, and that becomes the community. Two, who are doing the internal work, not relying on the other to do it for them, not relying on something external to fill them with the graces they need to be okay. But it's, no, I come inside, I unite, and the grace pours out from within, and we share that together as two. And that is, I think, where we start now as a community. And what is that too? I mean, that's marriage. I mean, that is, we're talking about the formation of community, which begins in the family. I mean, this is the right developmental phase, young adulthood. This is where we start pairing up.
Right. Yeah.
So community shifts. It's not, I'm part of this big high school clique anymore. It's, no, I'm finding my person. I'm finding myself through my relationship with another. And that is the spiritual process we're all undergoing. So the crumbling of society, the crumbling of religion. Christianity is really falling apart at the seams as a religion. But it's good. It needs to. It played its role. It was a parent and a mother to us all. And now that mother has to step back and let us stand on our own.
That's really, really fascinating. Is, like I mentioned a minute ago, I didn't identify with Christianity for a lot of my life. And it was something that was, aversive to me almost, from the perspective of it was associated with things or people that I felt did did things that were against women or against humanity, or were very self-focused, self-driven. And the process that I've gone through in the last couple years of shifting that, it wasn't something I sought. I wasn't like, I want to be a Christian now. It very organically began with my heart opening, and initially with music. Like with Christian music, I just found myself listening to it, and I kind of hid that for a while, but I felt better. Like I felt good, and I felt like something was moving within me that hadn't ever before. And I felt like I had to hide it. It was something that I didn't feel like I could tell you. I didn't feel like I could tell the kids, because of how I had lived, as that was like a terrible, degrading force in the world were the Christians. And
I'm a musician, so there's that other layer there.
You weren't playing Lauren Daigle for me. Like, were you doing that? And as it's come out, right, it's changed the context of our whole family, and then personally, even more personal, the illness that I've been going through, or my body transforming, and how much that's opened me to Jesus. But it still has a lot of crunchy edges. It still is something that I'm very much struggling with and sharing, with my own teenage children or early adult children, mostly because I'd raised them in this very particular way. And now they're like, what? Like, you went over to that side of things, and I'm still on this side, and I'm in the protests and all the stuff. And I'm like, not now. So there's an element of confusion. But I think that there are a lot of people that can, identify with what I've been going through. And I think that that's very much related in what you just shared, Josh, around what has gone on within the context of Christianity. And I'm also looking for guidance to sort this out. I'm looking, how do I talk to my kids about this? How do I, show up in the world? Because now there's tons of social media about fake Christians. They're like, oh, the people that were, in yoga class, and now they say they're Christians. They're not really Christians. They're fake Christians, and don't follow them. It's crazy out there. And so I'm like, well, am I a real Christian? Yeah, that's what happens when I get on Instagram. It's like an unfathomable sound that I can't even recreate.
That means you shouldn't get on Instagram.
Right.
Well, it's interesting with the music piece as being kind of an opening for you. And it's not necessarily about how it looks, how it's perceived, but there's a quality of frequency and vibration. And from a musician standpoint, and a conspiracy enthusiast for many years, I can.
That's your title.
Well, it's it's a mode that I have been in for many, many years. And so looking at music as an example, and then by extension, technology with social media,
right,
there is a certain quality and a certain frequency, and it has to do with, you could look at it from a somewhat conspiratorial or nefarious perspective, as that there's subliminal mind control things embedded into the technology, into the music, into the messaging, and all of the things that are designed to steer somebody in a certain way. But from a more simple and relational perspective, you were drawn to something that had a certain quality and felt a certain way within a particular type of music. And, Lauren Daigle, you mentioned specifically, she happens to be someone who has found a way to fulfill both the musical integrity piece along with this other quality of messaging that is, not this nefarious thing. So as a musician, I can actually appreciate and listen and hear the song's structure and the arrangements and the instrumentation and appreciate that. And then there's also this other piece within it that has drawn you in, where there's a certain quality of wholeness, truth and goodness that's there. Yeah. And so that's like an interesting piece of what we're all contending with, because then you bring into popular music, popular media, social media, technology, and all of these things, and you introduce that into the family culture, and then you have this push and pull of like everybody's trying to get the attention of the individual, of the child. Yeah. And so there's a lot to navigate within all of that with kids.
Yeah.
One thing that I would offer as a reflection, specifically with the music, is that, I think the idea of frequency and vibration is a really helpful lens to look at it. Another lens that we could use, it's very similar, is to say that all of these things have a living spiritual presence. There is, the spiritual world is woven intimately within the physical. We cannot have a physical world if there is not a spiritual world. Everything that is occurring on the spiritual plane has a spiritual aspect to it. It's emerging out of a spiritual world. And so when we make music, we are giving birth and altering spiritual realities. And so when a certain music is promoting hatred, division, greed, lust, selfishness in general, it's not just unfortunate, immoral, or this or that. It is a spiritual presence. It has a spiritual reality that affects those who receive it. And the converse is true. When someone sings from their heart in a way that is really meant to bring forth love to another, that is meant to bring forth God in a real way, God actually comes forth. And this is one of the things that I observed in my studies over the last 3 years, is that pearl that was planted within us by Jesus is a real, actual doorway into heaven. And that when we live a certain way and express ourselves in a certain way, that door is open, and these seeds of God, these specks of light actually come out of our heart and move with our words. And so when someone is creating music that is from their soul to the soul of another, to make the world more beautiful, good, peaceful, loving, God moves through that and is felt. It has a vibrational quality, but it also has a spiritual reality that changes the spiritual reality of those who receive. And so there's that piece about the music, and it's so important because it applies to more than just music. It applies to the way we talk, the way we wash dishes, cook, interact, make love. I mean, everything. I mean, it's everything. And this idea of a real Christian, what is a real Christian? A real Christian is one
Will you tell me? Will you help me with that?
It lives from their heart. Embracing, opening their hearts to be filled with the fullness of God so that it can flow from their hearts like a river of living water. I mean, Christianity has nothing to do with denominations, has nothing to do with creeds, nothing to do with liturgies or any of this stuff. These were in place to nurture the Christian until it was time for the Christian to stand on his or her own. But the church, what is the church? The church are those who are the body of God in the world, who actually have God woven in their bodies. And so, I mean, that's what we're talking about. Is it is, Christianity, whatever our assessment is of its current state and its place in history in the years to come, its entire role is to point us to God, not to replace God. It's to point us to our hearts where God can dwell, not to become a replacement temple. The temple is here. God is here. All we have to do is open our heart and God will abide and move. And that's what makes a real Christian, is where God is living in us. And we step into that more and more. We deepen that more and more. So that way, when we sing tomorrow, our words are filled with even more of God. Yeah. And more the next day. And more the next day.
I really like that I'm seeing this similar model or analogy in three of the different things that we've spoken about, with the child in the family, then, growing to a certain point to be able to leave the parents, the idea of community where the systems outside the state or the educational system or whatever it is crumbles, and then we're trying to figure out how to stand on our own without that. And then also in this spiritual context as well, where like the external structure of religion or the creed is not the thing, because that's actually falling apart. It's actually something like within each of our hearts and guiding us to be able to stand on our own in that regard as well. So I like that there's a common thread with some of these topics that we're discussing. That makes me smile.
So how can you help me with bringing this to my teenage boys? What advice could you give me, if any? Or
yeah, well, I'm chuckling, but it's also a question of immense weight. I mean, there's so much emotion and consequence attached to that, because we love so many people in the world, especially our children, and we want to see them shine like God in the world. We don't want to see them lost and stumbling in the darkness, and because there's so much pain. When we fill our hearts with love, what we realize is that we stand next to every man and woman on earth as our brothers and sisters. We're all united. I mean, we talk about longing for community, but once we are in God and God is in us, we realize we are not separate from anyone. We are connected in God to everyone. And so when any man or woman stumbles or is lost or suffers from hatred, is consumed by hatred and violence and things like that, it's painful, because that's our brother, that's our sister.
Right.
One who's created to shine like God in the world has lost their way. They are the sheep that has wandered off, and I'm willing to leave the 99 to go get them. And so, but when that sheep is lost as our own child, it touches us even more deeply, because that's our brother and our sister, and it's our child, and so, so it's a serious question, but the answer is in my mind very simple. It's we hold them in our heart, and we whenever we think of them, we open our heart, not to fill them with our affection, not to direct them with our will, but to say, God be with them. God fill them. That the light of God would illumine their hearts and illumine their path. That the love of God would swaddle them and hold them. That they will never be far from that real living presence of God. And I mean, that's the miracle of living as ones who are the image of God in the world, with this pearl, this fruit of the tree of life within us, is that when we pray with that way, humbly, opening our heart, God moves, and God actually does hold them in the presence of God. And that's a spiritual reality that can be observed. So, and the consequences is really profound. So, yeah, I mean, freedom, everyone has to freely choose the narrow path to God. And so you have done a profound job empowering your sons to stand in freedom and daughters. And I know your sons most, so I'm sorry I said that. But they are so independent and strong-willed, and it's beautiful because that really is the foundation. If they aren't free and independent in that way, how can they ever choose to love? They can't. Love doesn't come through submission. I love because I'm supposed to. Because my mom said I would go to hell if I didn't.
Right.
Yeah. Love is something that we freely choose, and we know this in our relationships with each other. We don't just love because I'm supposed to, and he's my partner, and we're married. It's like I look at him every day, and I choose every day to love him anew. And so. First of all, you've already laid a profound foundation. And the next step is to live it, to be love, to be light, and to be that lighthouse on the hill that shines outward. And when they are ready, if they ever are ready to do that, they will freely orient in that direction and freely make those choices. There's no other path other than to do it freely. So we hold them in light, we hold them in love, and hope that there will come a day where they will freely choose to bring that within.
Yeah.
Well said. The other thing too is that there's seemingly more of a presence of Christianity and Catholicism in the mainstream
also now. Right, like, so there is like this larger, do you see that too, like return to Christianity that's happening, like
Gwen Stefani,
like all the Chosen films, like
Gwen is a Christian.
Yes,
Gwen Stefani,
yes.
Mark Wahlberg.
Mark Wahlberg. A lot of people are speaking out and saying they're Christian. Kirk Cameron has like a whole series of children's Christian books and how he stepped out of Hollywood.
Mike Seaver, huh?
Yeah. So like it's a thing that's occurring as a big movement. And I do think that's part of how that's not real, that's just propaganda now, like labeling is coming in a little bit.
So how do we make sense of this draw toward Christianity among certain people that we're seeing? Perhaps there's this cultural shift. In light of especially my observations that Christianity as a religion, as an institution, is crumbling. What is it that we're observing? What is this cultural phenomenon? And my sense is, as a society, all the things that we stood on, that we thought were our foundation, are crumbling beneath our feet. We thought we could just rely on our local communities, on our government, on our education, on our religions, on all these different, on the medical system, etc. We could just stand there, and they were good and basically could hold us. But now we know that's not true. Every one of them needs our questioning, right? And we have to stand independently and find our way on our own. We can't just rely on, that doctor said though, or that government official said this, or that pastor said this, and so I know it's true. That era is over. We have to find it. And so that's a destabilizing time. That's a destabilizing reality when the ground is shifting in that way.
Right.
And so people want to cling to something they can hold on to and say, oh, yes, this will hold me. And that's not a bad thing, right? But we have to not let we can't go backwards developmentally. We have to keep moving forward. And so, yes, we may look to a religious tradition, Christianity, some tradition within Christianity, to give us some stability for a moment until we can find our feet again. And perhaps that's what we're seeing culturally, is people feeling shaky. There's something here within Christianity that does feel light, that does feel warm, that does feel strengthening and real, that I don't feel anywhere else. Right?
Yep.
And so I'm going to lean to it. But my feedback is it's not Christianity. It's God. And so, yes, Christianity is a wonderful guide and can be. But especially at this point, we cannot let it be a substitute for God. It's God that we need, living and abiding in us, that we are filled with the fullness of God. And we live in such a way from our hearts that God is constantly being cultivated within us, that the kingdom of God is coming within the garden of our hearts, is being cultivated here. And so, yeah, if your local church or your local community is helping you in that, that's wonderful. But don't be deceived and get comfortable and think that's enough. It has to be internal.
Interesting.
Yeah. So what does that look like for you within the context of your family and with your children who are younger than mine that I was referring to, but I also have a 7-year-old and a 13-year-old.
Right. Yeah, it is a challenge. It is a real challenge as a father to know how to do this, to introduce your children to the beauty of religion and the gift of it, while also not neglecting the profound abuses that are there, the profound unfortunate aspects of religion that are there. I don't think the path is necessarily just to hand them over to the religious institution to educate them. In the same way that you and I aren't very comfortable to hand our children over to the educational system and say, well, we can trust that. Yeah, we're fine with that. I'm sure the teachers are good people, and despite the fact that there are wonderful teachers, we as parents realize that it's up to us. My child's maturation is in my hands first and foremost. They are given to me. There's a responsibility for me to nurture. And so I think the impulse to homeschool for those who are able to do that is an impulse to say, I will carry the burden of this, the cross of my own children, that personal responsibility. And I think it's the same with religion and religious education. We don't just say, I'm sure the Sunday school program's good enough. I'm sure the experiences they'll have will be good enough. It's like, well, regardless of whether you how fully you invest your children within a religious system, that's up to you. But be mindful of the fact that the most important thing is to be light and to be love in your home, and to show your children what it is like to follow the example of Jesus, to love in the same way that Jesus did. They have to see it lived. It can't be an idea. It can't be a sermon. It can't be a commentary or a theology or this or that. A child cannot find God in catechism. They will find God in their hearts. And me as the parent, it is my responsibility to show them that as a living example. So send them to church if you want to. Don't do it if it doesn't make sense. Everyone's going to have different choices and different options, but the thing that matters is the heart. And that I will say that a million times over, because it's so important that we realize. We get hung up on what's right and what's wrong, and I need to do this technique or that technique. We can talk about all these sort of psychological things about attachment parenting or this parenting technique. But we've got to know at the end of the day, it's about our hearts as parents. Are we uniting ourselves to God daily, filling ourselves with the fullness of God and allowing that to flow out into our homes? Because that's what matters. All the externals aside, that's really what matters.
And so there's this part of me that's like, how do I do that? Like, how do we do that? What does that look like? Yeah. Thoughts? How do you do that?
Sometimes well, sometimes not so well. Mm-hmm. You know, it seems like I think that part of what you're saying about, and you know, Jaydee and I have talked about this idea of like the esoteric versus the exoteric stuff, and you know that gets into all of this stuff because I'm really interested in a lot of this kind of where conspiracy meets religion type stuff, and you know that's something that I've been invested in for a long time. But I think that it helps to hear this idea that it comes back to the heart because it really helps to remove a lot of the traps that go on up here. And if you know, each of us, if we can continue to just, you don't have to abandon the head altogether, but just make a regular visiting of the heart, take stock, and then, you know, as a couple, we can work towards checking in on that together. Like, what's the state of affair, or what's the state of condition of each of our hearts, then our collective hearts, because we've seen it so easily happen with our 7-year-old or any of the kids really. But you know, when you start getting spun out about, not you, but one of us starts getting spun out about something,
not me ever.
how that you know, has a effect on the environment as a whole. Right. And so, you know, it kind of comes back to that idea of,
well, so I'm thinking about
just the idea of radical accountability and like, or responsibility,
daily practices or things that you're implementing, or even if there are a set of agreements that you have, are those being modeled after attributes that you might say are associated with being a Christian? Like how does this come in to our households on a day-to-day? And you know, this question that I'm asking isn't one that can necessarily be answered right now. We're getting ready to wrap up, but this is one that I do think, first, we're all still learning and exploring, and we're all 20-year-olds, so that's, you know, we don't have the answers yet. If we're looking at the bigger process, unfolding of humanity and where we are in our developmental stages. But I do think that there's a lot more that we could look at and touch upon to kind of get into what does this mean for our daily lives, and for people who are listening and really are like, well, what do I do? Like, this is all beautiful and sounds great, and maybe there isn't really something to do. I don't know. Like,
well, I would love to have a further conversation around some of the practices and the tools, because that was something that I was thinking about in preparation for our conversation today, is this idea of how within a lot of the sermons and the teaching and the preaching that I hear at a lot of these churches, there's certain things that are allowed, and then it seems like there's a lot of things that aren't allowed. And what you're saying, Josh, is if it's connected to your heart and then connected to God, it seems like it would be less about the actual rules about whether something's allowed or not than the individual and personal responsibility of making that commitment to develop that channel. And so, I mean, it seems like there's a lot of rich ground for another conversation there.
I mean, when when you have a young child, a toddler, they need to be told, you cannot walk into the road. You know, they need to have that kind of instruction of not allowed. You know? And that's fine. The Jewish people needed that when Moses offered them those 10 commandments. Not allowed. You know, but as we mature, that no longer becomes relevant. In fact, it becomes a hindrance and keeps us in a juvenile state when it's time to step forward. And I think, you know, everyone is going to make different life decisions. We are watching humanity move in all directions. And what we need at this point is not someone to come along and say, good, bad, do, don't do, and assess all of them for us so that way we know what's right. That was the mistake I made as a 20-year-old, is that, if I can read all these books and assess all these opinions, I will know what is the right way to believe. I'll know the right way to express my faith, the right way to worship. I'll know the right way to live. I'll know the right way to parent, and everything will be perfect because I will be right. And if I were to speak to my 20-year-old self now, 2 decades later, I would say, slow down, Josh, and come into your heart and simply humbly place yourself before God and say, God, be with me. Wherever I am, whatever I'm doing, whatever situation is before me, God be with me. And that is what's important. And, we will all make different decisions, and trying to assess them as right or wrong can often send us in the wrong direction. Instead, we say, well, where's your heart as you make this step forward? Is your intention to gratify yourself and your own selfish interests? Or is your intention to really sow these seeds of God outward into the world? And that needs to be our metric of assessing ourselves, our introspection. And I think that is what is needed for us to be building the kingdom within ourselves and within the world around us. If we want a home that is shining like God, then we got to be in the place where God dwells, in our hearts.
So yeah, you got that.
Beautiful.
You got
I
that,
got
right?
That.
Yeah.
You got that.
I think we can abuse ourselves in so many ways and make it so hard, but it's so simple. It really is so very simple. If we ask, it will be given. If we seek, we will find. If we knock upon that door within our hearts, it will be opened and God will come forth. That's how we live. We have to learn to live from our hearts, knocking upon that door as often as we can.
And it feels like the calm reassurance of hearing you say that is something that can be really beneficial to anyone. I feel settled and calmer after having heard you describe it in that way. And so I hope it seems like it does that for you too.
Do I look calmer?
Well, it feels like there's like you said, slow down, come into your heart. And like these simple, gentle reminders seem to really have an effect on my whole being, for one.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And thank you for being that presence in the world. It's been really valuable to have you in our lives and be able to speak and talk through some of the things that we've gone through at various times with you and hear that calm, reassuring presence and voice from you. And so, so Josh McLaughlin, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much for your time today, and you'll be
Thank
back.
you.
We'll have you back.
Yes, we would love to continue this and, get into some of the things that we thought about that would be exciting to get into next time. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you so much, Josh.
Thanks, Josh.
Until next time, everybody.